Good morning, everybody. I hope you all have had a fabulous week. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jackie, and I have the absolute pleasure of telling the kids' story every week. So this week, our story is going to be the story of Esther. And Esther has such an incredible story. And she actually is one of my favorite stories. I say that about all of the stories, but it is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. So our story this week is going to start in Esther chapter 1, right? And so our story starts actually not with Esther. It starts with a king. And and this king, he liked to have parties. He liked to have people over and have dinner and feasts and celebrations. And that's what he did. So his first feast that he decided to have to show his greatness lasted 180 days. Now, I don't know about you guys, but 180 days is a really, really long time. Like super long. So after that, the last 7 days of this huge feast, because I said it lasted 187 days. So he celebrated 180 days to show his greatness. And then the last 7 days, he wanted to present his wife to all of his friends. He wanted to show her off, say, look at how beautiful she is. And so the king had a little bit too much to drink, and he drunkenly told her to come up to him, come up to the party, and show everybody how beautiful you are. And she decided that she didn't really want to do that. That wasn't something that sounded fun to her. And so because of this, the king got furious. He was so upset, right? And so he decided that he was going to make a decree that all men should be masters of their household. And because of how his wife responded to him wanting to show her off, he decided that he didn't want her as a wife anymore. He wanted a new wife. And so he held what would be considered a beauty contest to find a replacement, right? And so this is where we start to meet Esther. And Esther, both of her parents actually died when she was little, so she was an orphan. But her cousin Mordecai took her, adopted her, and raised her as his own child, all right? And so Esther was Jewish, and Mordecai told her, you know what, you should try, just see how far you get. See if you can become the queen. And so that's what she did. She decided to join this contest, join this competition to see if she could become the next queen, right? And so the king, when he sees Esther, he sees how beautiful she is, and he already really likes her. And this worked out really well for her because she ends up being chosen as the new queen, right? And so they have a huge celebration, right? And after this celebration, Mordecai is in the castle because Esther is crowned queen, and it was important for him to be there. And he overhears 2 guards talking about killing the king. And so Mordecai tells Esther, the new queen, about the plan, and she goes and tells the king. And the king celebrates and praises Mordecai for saving his life, right? But with every good thing comes a bad thing. And this is where we meet Haman. Now, Haman is the bad guy in our story, and he is actually promoted to this high position, right next to the king. And Mordecai and Haman didn't really like each other all that much, because Mordecai decided that he didn't want to kneel before Haman. He only wanted to kneel before God. And so Haman was so upset about this that he decides, you know what, I'm going to go to the king and see what I can do to solve what he saw as a problem, right? And so Haman goes to the king and tells him, hey, there's this group of people who aren't following your orders, and I really think that something needs to be done about this, right? And so Haman convinces the king that he needs to make a decree to destroy, kill, and annihilate all of the Jews in the kingdom, right? And so this happened, and Haman, they were trying to figure out what day should this happen on? What day should we take care of this problem, right? And so he decided that he was going to pick the day by rolling dice, which is very random. It makes it not a particular day, you know? And so the king agrees, fills out this decree, and stamps it with his ring, making it official, right? And for those of you who aren't super familiar with king's decrees, because that's not something a lot of people know a lot about, once the king stamps it with his ring and it's sent out, there's no reversing it. All right, so our story now actually goes back to Esther and Mordecai. And Esther, like I said before, is Jewish, and that makes Mordecai Jewish too. And the problem is, with this decree that Haman convinced the king to send out, they're included. Esther and Mordecai are included in this decree. And Mordecai has this idea that maybe this is the reason that Esther has become queen, is to save the Jewish people. And Esther realizes how dangerous it is to reveal her identity to the king, but she thinks that this is the only way she can save her life and the lives of her people. And so she actually has this famous line, and she says, "If I perish, I perish." But she is fully reliant on God and his capabilities and will to make sure that everything is taken care of. All right. And so after she and Mordecai discuss their plan on revealing her identity to the king, she decides to hold her own banquet. Since she can't go talk to the king face to face without a formal invitation, she invites him to come and eat and have a party, right? And so she invites Haman, she invites Mordecai, she invites the king, and they're all having a great time eating, drinking, having fun, talking. And Haman actually leaves drunk. He had too much to drink, and he is still so mad at Mordecai for not kneeling before him that he actually wants to kill Mordecai. And he tells the king that he wants to hang Mordecai. And so they build up this giant stake in the courtyard to have Mordecai impaled on the following couple of days. And so after the king leaves this first banquet, he can't sleep. He's up and he's tossing and he's turning, and he doesn't really know why. And then he remembers that Mordecai actually saved his life. And instead of killing Mordecai, the king says that Mordecai should be praised through the whole city. And so that's what happens. But this is the turning point where we start to see Haman lose power and Mordecai gain power, which is foreshadowing into the next parts of our story. All right, and so that leads us to our next part of the story, which is Esther's second banquet. And Esther, at this banquet, informs the king that she actually is Jewish, and Haman's decree that the king signed off on includes Mordecai and herself in the elimination. They're included in the killing and death that is supposed to be happening. And so she begs the king, she pleads and pleads with him to save her life and the lives of her people. But there's a problem. The decree can't be reversed because, like I said before, anything with a stamp gets sent out and is official. It can't be reversed. And so this enrages the king so much that he was tricked and deceived by his friend, or who he thought was his friend, Haman. And he decides that instead of impaling Mordecai on this 75-foot tall stake in the middle of the courtyard that was originally made for Mordecai, he's going to impale Haman. And so Haman realizes how much trouble he's in, and he begs with Esther for his life. And it doesn't work. So the next part of our story is what Esther and Mordecai do to fix the problem. The huge problem is there's a decree out to kill them, and they have nothing that they can do to change it. And so Esther goes out and she talks to the king, and the king gives her permission, and Mordecai permission, to write a decree to the Jewish people as a response, if that makes sense. So they're responding to the death threat that they just received, right? And so this decree that Esther and Mordecai send out basically says that the Jews were ordered to defend themselves and destroy any army or anyone who tried to hurt them. And this was signed off by the king and stamped with his ring, so it was official and it couldn't be revoked or changed. So Mordecai, after he helps Esther write this, leaves the king's presence, but he has gained favor and power with the king. He basically rises up to second in command, right? And so because of all that Mordecai did to save Esther, he, like I said, was elevated to the right-hand man of the king. And so once the day of the decree stating death to all Jews comes, the Jews actually win, right? They were able to defend themselves, and on the first day, there were 2 days of war, essentially, and fighting. And on the first day, the Jews decided that they wanted to start by taking out Haman's family and everyone who was a part of his plan to kill the Jews knowingly. And so that's what they did, and they came out victorious. And then on the second day, the Jews move on to anyone else who plotted against them in the entire kingdom, right? So they started at first with just the castle, the palace, with the people who plotted against them, just one small area, and then they moved to the entire kingdom, and they came out victorious. And this victory led to a celebration because they were able to not die. They were able to pass death. And so because of this victory, a feast was started. And it was started with a decree so that it couldn't be reversed. And this feast is called Purim, and it lasts 2 days to celebrate the deliverance of the Jews, right? And so we see the 2 days that they fought and won are also reflected in the 2 days of celebration, right? And so the last chapter of Esther talks a lot about Mordecai and his greatness and splendor, and the Jews thriving in this kingdom because of everything that Mordecai and Esther were able to do for them. So that is the end of our story today. I hope you all enjoyed it, and hopefully I get to see you guys live and in person next week. Bye!